So today, Donald Trump unveiled his boldest vision yet for MAGA during a press conference, from renaming the Gulf of Mexico to taking Greenland, the Panama Canal, and even taking Canada, to also threatening the Middle East with massive war. And it's left some people wondering if MAGA 2.0 is about isolationism and focusing on America, or if it's now a giant expansionist project. Let's start with his Greater America project. He was asked if he would rule out military action, taking military action to gain the Panama Canal and Greenland, and he actually refused to say that he would not use military action. Watch this.
Let's start, if we could, with your references to Greenland and the Panama Canal, so forth. Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
And can you tell us a little bit about what your plan is? Are you going to negotiate a new treaty? Are you going to ask the Canadians to hold a vote? What is the strategy?
Yeah, I can't assure you, you're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this, we need them for economic security. The Panama Canal was built for our military. I'm not going to commit to that now. It might be that you'll have to do something. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it. They've abused that gift. It should have never been made, by the way. Giving the Panama Canal is why Jimmy Carter lost the election, in my opinion, more so maybe than the hostages. The hostages were a big deal. But if you remember, and nobody wants to talk about the Panama Canal now because, you know, it's inappropriate, I guess, but because it's a bad part of the Carter legacy. But he was a good man. Look, he was a good man. I knew him a little bit, and he was a very fine person, but that was a big mistake. Giving the Panama Canal to Panama was a very big mistake. We lost 38,000 people. It cost us the equivalent of $1 trillion, maybe more than that. Probably the most expensive, they say it was the most expensive structure, if we call it a structure, which I guess you can, ever built. And giving that away was a horrible thing. And I believe that's why Jimmy Carter lost the election, even more so than the hostages. Those two things.
Okay. Panama Canal definitely was a very big, expensive, U.S.-funded project. U.S. workers, U.S. money went into building that Panama Canal. This is all about China. In fact, Greenland, and we're going to go deeper into Greenland next segment. I want to focus on that specifically, but Greenland and Panama Canal have everything to do with China and the growing influence of China, a bit about Russia as well when it comes to the Arctic region and Arctic routes, shipping routes up there. Russia's doing a lot of work in that region, of course, because they're right there in the Arctic zone. But this all has to do with China, and Trump is dead serious about it. Would he take the Panama Canal using military force? I don't think he will need to. Quite honestly, I think that Panama will cave and just say, all right, fine. What do you want from us? I think China's already preparing for this. So China's going to say, all right, fine. We're already building our own canal in Nicaragua. What happens with Panama Canal, I think is yet to be seen. I'm sure what'll happen is Panama will just say to the United States, okay, fine. What do you want from us? We'll do it. We'll give you a better deal. You know, this is how Trump gets his deal. He threatens the military force, and then usually the other side caves. And that's worked for him in his first term. Whether or not it continues to work, I think it would work with Panama. I don't know if it would work with other regions of the world. That is yet to be seen. And we'll talk about some of the warmongery comments that he made during his press conference today, because that matters. I mean, if these other countries stop taking him serious and they say, you know what, never mind, we'll just go to war with you because we're not going to be bullied by you anymore, then that strategy doesn't work. That negotiation tactic of shaking them down for their milk money, that is, that strategy only lasts for so long. All right. So then he talks about the Gulf of America. He wants to rename. Why? I don't know. This is just make America great again. Go and rename some places on a map. If they say Mexico, make them America, that's what's going to make America great again. So he talks about changing the name.
We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. which has a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name. And it's appropriate. It's appropriate.
Well, I mean, I guess, the Gulf of Mexico certainly does take up quite a few of the U.S. states. It was named Gulf of Mexico because at the time, many of those U.S. states were Mexico. They were not the United States. So it was the Gulf of Mexico. Now, Texas and Louisiana and all of, I don't know if, Louisiana was never Mexico, right? But Texas certainly was. So when you're going up in the Gulf Coast, a lot of it was Mexico at the time. Now a lot of it's America. It's maybe about 50-50 between the two, maybe a little bit more America. So he wants to rename it Gulf of America. And guess what? Marjorie Taylor Greene announced that she is filing legislation to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And sorry, I am getting an alert right now that we may have to evacuate soon because of the fires. This is just a nightmare. Okay, so not yet, but it looks like the fires are spreading towards me, guys, and there might be a possibility that we'll see how the evacuation zone goes, but I might end up being in it. Hopefully not. Okay, so Marjorie Taylor Greene announced that she is going to be filing legislation to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America after President-elect Donald Trump made the pitch during a press conference. Okay, this press conference was wild, I tell you. It was wild. All right, the next thing he talks about is Ukraine and NATO expansion and how that pissed off Russia. Couldn't agree more with him on this one.
A big part of the problem was Russia for many, many years, long before Putin said you could never have NATO involved with Ukraine. Now, they've said that. That's been like written in stone. And somewhere along the line, Biden said, no, they should be able to join NATO. Well, then Russia has somebody right on their doorstep, and I could understand their feeling about that. But there were a lot of mistakes made in that negotiation. And when I heard the way that Biden was negotiating, I said, you're going to end up in a war. And it turned out to be a very bad war. And it could escalate. That war could escalate to be much worse than it is right now.
They can never join NATO.
Well, my view is that it was always understood. In fact, I believe that they had a deal, and then Biden broke it. They had a deal, which would have been a satisfactory deal to Ukraine and everybody else, but that Biden said, no, you have to be able to join NATO.
Okay. So he's right on this. This is absolutely what provoked Russia. It would provoke the United States. Any normal, rational thinking person would understand that. That then provoked Russia to go to war because we kept giving Ukraine hope, thinking, trying to dangle that. Yeah, we'll put you in NATO. We're still saying that. Yeah, we'll put you in NATO. Don't worry about it. We'll put you in NATO. Now, talking about NATO, the first term of Trump, he said that he would get rid of NATO. He talked a lot about getting rid of NATO. It turns out that was a negotiation tactic. I know a lot of us would love to see the dismantling of NATO. We don't see how it's useful anymore for the United States. European countries should be able to protect themselves. The U.S., we're way over here. We're the only country that ever triggered Article 5 that was after 9/11. So there's a lot of questioning. There's a lot of questions about. About NATO and what Trump's agenda really was on that. So Trump made all of us believe he wanted to get rid of NATO. Now it turns out all he really wanted was for NATO to just pay more, that there was really no incentive for him to get rid of NATO entirely. Watch this.
But a prime minister stood up from a country, a famous meeting of 28 nations with no press, no anybody in the room. He stood up, he says, does that mean if we don't pay our bill, and at that point it was 2%, it should be 5%. It should be 5%, not 2%. But at that point it was 2%, but many people didn't pay. Some people didn't pay anything. But many people were way, including Germany. Germany was at less than 1%.
You're going to press for 5%?
Well, I think NATO should have 5%, yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2%. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%. I'm the one that got them to pay 2%. But a gentleman stood up, a prime minister stood up, and he said to me, sir, could I ask you a question? You're saying we have to pay our bills. If we don't pay our bills, will the United States protect us from Russia? I said, if you don't pay, you mean you're delinquent? He said, yes. He said, if you're delinquent, we will not protect you. I took a lot of heat. although it was somewhat closed door, I took a lot of heat from the media. And you know what happened? The money started pouring in. That's why NATO has money. And the Secretary General said it was the most incredible thing he had ever seen in a negotiation. Now, if I would have said, yes, we will, nobody would have paid. If I would have loved to say, yes, we'll protect you even if you don't pay. But that's not the way life works.
Okay, so it's really just a business agreement. That's the issue with NATO. He was never really wanting to get rid of NATO. He was just wanting to make NATO countries pay more. So if you are a big supporter of Donald Trump, how does this make you feel? I'm curious, do you think, oh, okay, that's fine? Or do you feel a little bit duped? Like, no, I thought he meant really genuinely that he was going to get us out of NATO, that he didn't see a need for it anymore. But instead, it turns out this was just art of the deal. Do you feel a little bit like you got had in that deal somewhat? Curious about that. Same thing when it comes to immigration, right? We just now had that debate about H-1B visas. Trump kept saying immigrants, and even in his first term, he said H-1B visa was being abused. People were coming in. They were just replacing American workers and undercutting American workers, because what they could do with these H-1B visa holders is they could work them to death. They couldn't complain. They couldn't switch jobs. And they would work for less money, and they'd work more hours for less money than an American. They were basically exploiting them because they knew that Americans had a different quality of life, a different standard, and wanted to get paid for their work. Whereas if you bring over people from India and they're dirt poor over there and they come over here and they're excited to be here, they're grateful to be here, they're going to work 20 hours a day for you if you demand it. That has been exposed. Trump called it out during his first term. Now what is he doing? Backpedaling on that. Does that make you feel had a little? Was that some sort of art of a deal negotiation that he was doing? Or now is he just caving to the largest political donor this political cycle, Elon Musk, who relies on H-1B visa workers, apparently? Okay, let's move on to war. Here's another big one. Trump said he was against war. He wanted peace, but now he's threatening the Middle East with basically complete and total annihilation. Watch this.
All hell will be
Before I
paid,
take
or
office.
all hell must be paid if they don't release the
You know what that
hostages.
means, don't you?
Well-
Do I have to define it for you? Look, all
No, I know
hell
you're not
will
gonna
break out.
telegraph
If
what-
those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East.
Can you elaborate?
And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is. And they should have given them back a long time. They should have never taken them. There should have never been the attack of October 7th. People forget
All hell will be
before I
paid,
take
or
office.
Okay.
all hell must be paid if they don't release the hostages.
Right. Okay. So there he's saying all hell is going to break loose if they don't release the hostages, that he's going to go and annihilate the Palestinians. Annihilate, he says, Hamas, but we all know the people that have been annihilated are the actual civilian people, the Palestinian people. And he's saying, give us the hostages back or else we're going to continue a genocide. It's going to be worse than what's happening to you right now, essentially. The genocide will get worse under Donald Trump is what he says. Is that what people voted for when they voted for Donald Trump? I'm just really curious about that. Does this type of negotiation tactic work? When it comes to the Palestinian people and how oppressed they've been by the Israelis, nothing has worked for them at all. And the only thing they're banking on is the fact that the world is opening up their eyes to the treatment that they've been enduring for 70 plus years. And now the world is actually seeing it and paying attention to it. And there's the internet and there's free speech and people are able to actually discuss it and talk about it. And now they're seeing the narrative change. So not to mention the number of hostages Israel is holding is like 100 times higher than the number of hostages Hamas is holding. That is a verified fact. Israel, though, the narrative is they don't call them hostages. They call them prisoners. And Hamas, they have hostages and Israel has prisoners. But Israel's prisoners look like hostages. I mean, many of them are civilians. Many of them are children, women, children, others, and Israel's holding them, but they get to say they're a prisoner. And, oh, they've got our hostages. And so a lot of that is the framing. But Trump is saying to them, and the reason why Hamas won't give up their hostages is because Israel won't give them their hostages. they're wanting their hostages back. They're wanting to do a hostage swap, and Israel doesn't want to do it. Israel instead wants to commit a genocide. And Trump is now saying, go ahead and commit the genocide if they don't give the hostages back. What's in it for the Palestinians? So they would give up the hostages and not get their own hostages back? And the only reason why they would do that is because if they don't, they get genocided. I mean, this is one would have to really think, what type of negotiation is that? How would you respond if you were Palestinian? Okay, Trump then talks about Iran. A reporter asks him about whether or not his administration would do a preemptive first strike on Iran, and Trump refuses to answer. Let's see here.
The last time you were here, you were asked a question about the U.S. possibly launching a preemptive strike on Iran. You said you wouldn't answer that question.
On who?
Obviously, on Iran. The U.S. launching a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear facilities.
And I said, I don't talk about it. It's a military strategy.
But it is a legitimate question. It's something that
Well, it's not really, because only a stupid person would answer it. Look, it's a military strategy, and I'm not answering your questions on military strategy.
Fair enough. I don't think he should answer on military strategy, but the strategy is the same strategy he's always taken. And that is, I'm going to threaten you and threaten you with annihilation or threaten you with some bad things. And that'll hopefully get you to the table to negotiate. The question we have is whether or not he's going to take that tactic with Russia and whether or not that would work. Would it work with Iran? Would it work with Russia? Russia in particular, would it work? Would it work with China? All of these threats. A lot of these players are positioning themselves to just say, fine, go for it. Try us. We dare you. We know that you're just doing this for art of the deal. You think that this is going to pressure us, but we're actually going to call your bluff on this because we're ready to go. If you're serious about striking, so are we. We're serious too. So this only works if the other side is truly weaker and more afraid of you. But the minute they're not, this doesn't work. And this could genuinely, horrifically backfire. And that is my concern, is that these countries, they were paying attention to the news. They knew that they saw what it was like under Trump in the first term. They saw Trump lose. Biden got in there. They all got a bit of a breather for 4 years, somewhat. I mean, Russia, obviously, things got worse for them. They ended up having to go to war. But there was certainly they weren't being threatened blatantly the way Trump is doing as an act of negotiation. So they had time to kind of circle the wagons and figure things out. They also saw the writing on the wall that Trump would likely be reelected. So they were planning for that. Here he is. He's making the same threats that he did in the first term, but these other countries are in a different playing position. And, we're playing a game of chess, and these other players have been studying the board for a bit longer, and they're kind of like, I don't know, man. I don't know if this is really going to work. Now moving on to Canada, Trump has been making a lot of interesting comments about turning Canada, the entire nation of Canada, into the 51st state. Obviously, that right there seems kind of ridiculous because Canada's a massive country. It's got a lot of provinces. You would turn it into many states, not just the 51st state, one giant state of Canada. So it seems like it's in jest, but is it? Is it? I don't know.
If we were to work under the assumption that you're serious about making Canada 51st state of the United States, the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada said, under no circumstance will it ever be the 51st state.
Maybe he won't win, but maybe he will. I don't
point, you had suggested.
Listen, I don't care what he says.
But Sir real fast, you said you were considering military force to acquire Panama and Greenland. Are you also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada?
No, economic force. Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. But here's the problem with Canada. So many friends up there. I love the Canadian people. They're great. But we're spending hundreds of billions a year to protect it. We're spending hundreds of billions a year to take care of Canada. We lose in trade deficits. We're losing massive. We don't need their cars. They make 20% of our cars. We don't need that. I'd rather make them in Detroit. We don't need the cars. We don't need their lumber. We have massive fields of lumber. We don't need their lumber. We have to unrestrict them because stupid people put, restrictions on, but I can do that with an executive order. We don't need anything they have. We don't need their dairy products. We have more than they have. We don't need anything. So why are we losing $200 billion a year and more to protect Canada? And I said that to, as I called him, Governor Trudeau. I said, listen, what would happen if we didn't subsidize you, if we didn't, because we give them a lot of money. We help them. As an example, we're buying icebreakers, and Canada wants to join us in the buying of icebreakers. I said, we don't really want to have a partner in the buying of icebreakers. We don't need a partner. But no right. Nope, no right. Here's what we have. We have a right not to help them with their financial difficulties because we owe $36 trillion too. We're going to start knocking it out pretty fast, but we're going to be able to do it because of energy and other things. But no right. No right. But why are we supporting a country 200 billion plus a year? Our military is at their disposal. All of these other things, they should be a state. That's why I told Trudeau when he came down, I said, what would happen if we didn't do it? He said Canada would dissolve. Canada wouldn't be able to function if we didn't take their 20% of our car market. They send us hundreds of thousands of cars. They make a lot of money with that. They send us a lot of other things that we don't need. We don't need their cars, and we don't need the other products. We don't need their milk. We got a lot of milk. We got a lot of everything, and we don't need any of it. So I said to him, well, why are we doing it? He said, I don't really know. He was unable to answer the question, but I can answer it. We're doing it because of habit, and we're doing it because we like our neighbors, and we've been good neighbors, but we can't do it forever, and it's a tremendous amount of money. And why should we have a $200 billion deficit and add on to that many, many other things that we give them in terms of subsidy? And I said, that's okay to have if you're a state. But if you're another country, we don't want to have it. We're not going to have it with European Union either. European Union, we have a trade deficit of $350 billion. They don't take our cars. They don't take our farm product. They don't take anything. And so we're not going to have it with them either.
Okay, so he's threatening Canada, saying we don't need them. They need us. We don't need them. So why are we helping them? What are we doing here? There's one big reason why you would want to help your neighbor when you're, if you're a country and you've got a large neighbor like Canada next to you, is not simply because you are a kind country and you like helping out others. There's also an issue of national security in regards to it. What you don't want to have on your border is a failed state. And that's the issue we have with Mexico. That's why we have a lot of people crossing over the Mexico-US border. If Mexico wasn't a failed state, essentially, if Mexico wasn't as dangerous as it is, if it got the corruption out of their government, their police forces, then people from Latin America wouldn't be so eager to come running to the United States. They might stay in Mexico. Same thing with Mexico's southern borders. If the states below Mexico weren't failed nations, they wouldn't see all of this immigration. Immigration is caused by poverty and war and failed nations. And so you want your neighbors to be as strong as possible just to keep your own national security intact. So there is a benefit to doing it. Even if you don't really get anything from that country, what you are getting is security. And that is, that's a pretty darn big one. If Canada becomes a failed nation and people start flooding into Canada knowing they can just come across the Canadian-US border, that's an issue of national security. So something to think about there. Trudeau has come out, though, and said, here's Trump once again saying, many people in Canada love being the 51st state. The United States can no longer suffer the massive trade deficits and subsidies that Canada needs to stay afloat. Justin Trudeau knew this and resigned. If Canada merged with the US, there would be no tariffs, taxes would go way down, and they would be totally secure from the threat of the Russian and Chinese ships that are constantly surrounding them. Together, what a great nation it would be. So he's saying this about Canada. He's also saying this about Greenland, but there's a big issue with that. We're going to get to that when we talk about Greenland. The people in Canada, the people in Greenland, they're used to certain social security safety nets that we do not get here in the United States. Are we going to be continuing to fund that? Are we going to be ripping that away from the people in Canada? Are we going to take away their free healthcare, education, their preschool? Are we going to be taking all that away? Because they get that for free. Their taxes pay for that. That's what their government spends money on, whereas ours spends money on endless military and war around the world. Justin Trudeau has responded to this. He says there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States. Workers and communities in both of our countries benefit from being each other's biggest trading and security partner. Interestingly, Scott, why have I just blanked on his name? Why did I just blank, guys? You know who I'm talking about. Scott, hold on 1 second. Let me get to the, I've just got too much going on right now. Too much going on through my brain. Scott Ritter. Okay. Scott Ritter responded actually to this tweet, and he had an interesting response that people are now kind of raking Scott Ritter through the coals over, because they're like, what? Scott, has your account been hacked? He said, you cost our economy $100 billion in annual subsidies, and your military complicates continental security. Sorry, Justin, we get no benefit from your existence as an independent nation state. You, on the other hand, are viable solely because of us. Hell freezes over. Just ask the Eagles. So Scott Ritter is actually advocating essentially for Canada to become part of the United States. Yeah, I mean, look, they have a completely different system than we do when it comes to, they have all the things that many people on the progressive left have been asking for: universal healthcare, universal preschool, free college education. They've got a lot of these types of programs, and especially Greenland even more so. And what are Americans going to say about that? Maybe it'd be a good thing if we brought these countries in, then maybe Americans would say, hey, we also don't want to be spending all of our money on military adventurism around the world, trying to threaten Iran and doing all this military stuff. We want you to spend your money on us the way the Danes spend it on their people, the way Canadians spend it on their people. We want you to spend it on us, make America great again, become more isolationist, focus on building America, the American people. We're suffering. We're being riddled in bankruptcy because of healthcare bills. We have the signs of a failed nation economically, where the rich are just getting richer and the middle class and the poor are getting poorer. And yet we see these other countries that we've now brought into the fold, and they get all of these things that we don't get. Would Americans scream about that? Or would Americans threaten and say, sorry, guys, yeah, we made you part of America, but guess what we're going to do? We're going to rip your healthcare away from you. Now, a lot of people say, yeah, but their healthcare system sucks. You can't get healthcare in Canada. You can't get healthcare here in the United States. Who are you kidding? Why do people even say that type of bullshit? Honestly, here in this country, you don't have $1 million to go get that great tech, that great advancement. You say America has the best, the best. You're not the king of England flying over to the United States, getting the best healthcare. That's not you. You are the average person who are paying through the nose, and you're still being declined when you ask your insurance to cover something. You go to the hospital, you get your treatment. You're not actually ever being denied treatment. Quite honestly, you're never denied. It's just that you're being forced to pay for it. That's the difference. So you get access, or you still have to, or some things you don't get access because it's not emergency. So if you need a knee replacement and your health insurance company says, no, we're not going to do it, or they say, yeah, we will, but you're going to have to pay this much X dollars, you still don't have access to that knee replacement surgery. So why are you bitching about a Canadian having to wait 6 months for theirs? Like, why are you bitching about that? You can never get it because you can never afford it. So why are you buying into the propaganda that, well, the Canadians, they have to wait 6 months? Yeah, well, you've been waiting 6 years and you still haven't gotten it. So this is just weird. I don't know, what Trump is talking about when he's talking about annexing Canada and Greenland, and how exactly this is going to play out. The Canadians, though, have responded to this. Justin Trudeau saying not a chance in hell, but other Canadians have a different answer to it. It's a pretty good answer, actually. Watch this.
Hey, Donald, have we got a deal for you? You think we want to be the 51st state? Nah, but maybe California would like to be the 11th province. How about it? California, Oregon, Washington, you've got geography in common with us. And not only that, we've already got a carbon trading system between California and Quebec. We've got some strong alliances on our west coast from British Columbia. There's been a lot of academic papers on the idea of Cascadia. So California, Governor Newsom, and Washington State, Jay Inslee, and newly elected Governor of Oregon, Tina Kotek. How about it? Want to put a referendum to your citizens? Because this is what you deal. Have we got a deal for you? This is what you get. Free health care. Universal free health care. No more one-year-olds who suddenly fall off the Medicaid list and their parents are in the news because they're trying to do a GoFundMe so they can get their daughter to a doctor. Universal free health care. And guess what? Those gun laws that your Congress is too afraid to pass because of the national gun lobby, we already got our strict gun laws.
This is actually a brilliant response. I mean, I don't hope for this. I'm in California and I don't want to be part of Canada, but there are plenty of Californians who do. And the reality of it is, if Trump starts threatening Canada and kind of making these passes at them, and if Greenland, if he starts taking Greenland, there are going to be states in this union who are going to get some bright ideas. They already have those bright ideas. They already have those desires. They're going to get those bright ideas even more so. And they're going to say, hey, if Trump can do it, if he could just suddenly annex Greenland and threaten Canada like this, then we can leave. We can leave. We can go. We can be part of Canada. There are so many people in Washington, Oregon, and California who already want this. This is actually way more likely than Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state. It is way more likely that the U.S. Loses California, Washington, and Oregon to Canada. And Hawaii might go too. That, of course, would probably trigger a war. Probably wouldn't be let out of the union very easily, but nonetheless, there's already been a movement for some sort of exit, Cal exit from the union, and California being the most economically, robust state in the union. The union needs California. California hates Donald Trump. Many of them do, and I guess the two could play this game. So that's why it's a dangerous game. I mean, these types of threats are dangerous if the other side just doesn't take you seriously. If the other side says, you know what, I'm calling your bluff, go for it, buddy, then you've lost that art of negotiation, the art of the deal. What is your next tactic then? And right now, what Trump is doing, he hasn't gotten in office yet, so he could say a lot of things, but what he's doing right now is he's posturing, using a lot of strength. He knows that this riles up his voting base. They love it. They love to hear it. They love to think, all right, baby, America's back. I don't know what happened to this isolationism, MAGA isolationist. Let's focus on America. Let's focus on the American people, because this Donald Trump, this MAGA 2.0, is certainly more about expansionism, threatening war, and trying to grow, and put in more people under us that are going to require assistance and subsidies and whatnot. And I don't, this is not focusing on the American people. Suddenly we're going to be taking care of Canadians. We're going to be taking care of Greenlanders. The countdown is on before the new administration exposes the entire pandemic. Most know that a large sum of people's health was negatively impacted by global coercion, whether severe side effects or experiencing long COVID. Check out this natural solution formulated by Dr. Peter McCullough in collaboration with The Wellness Company. And they just leveled up their original detox formula for $30 less, introducing the 3-in-1 Ultimate Spike Detox, conveniently consolidated into one capsule with 4 times more nattokinase, 500 milligrams of bromelain, and 500 milligrams of turmeric root extract. Nattokinase is an enzyme researched for its anti-clotting effects, and it may work to break down spike proteins. Combined with bromelain and curcumin, it provides a potent blend for detoxification and cellular support. Crafted with 100% natural ingredients, Ultimate Spike Detox is backed by research offering effective support for your cell's natural repair and recovery. Experience the only formula approved and used by Dr. McCullough, a top freedom-fighting doctor who risked it all. Head to twc.health/Kim, and you'll get 10% off plus free shipping. Again, that is use code Kim at twc.health/Kim. Use code Kim and get 10% off. Get back to that pre-COVID feeling.